Welcome to Not Factory Approved, the channel where I demonstrate I have no idea what I'm doing, or I just get into things over my head. This car is just full of adventure. It's got a new wrinkle every time I try it. The latest one being that it overheated. And I had a 7-pound radiator cap, which was new. I drove it and I found that it was overheating more at low speeds. Seemed to be, it would do okay if I could do about 50 miles an hour, 80 kilometers if you're in Canada. I got back and I put a cheap temperature gauge into it because I could not fix the original to get it work properly. It shows hot way too easily and I can't correct it. And it's not the sender, even with the original proper sender it does that. So I got it back. It's indicating hot. It's running fine. There's no water flowing out of the radiator. I can't hear any bubbling going on. So I popped the radiator cap to its release position. Still nothing venting. So then I opened it and I got a lovely burn there. So I keep it covered while I'm working, but it's basically from my thumb to my wrist where the glove sits. Maybe a little bit closer to me. It's lovely, discolored and peeling and all that kind of stuff, and somewhat painful, but it is getting better. Thank God for healing. I have been looking to try and find out what's going on with this thing, and originally when it overheated I was finding all sorts of goop coming out, and the goop was coming out because when I took it to the machine shop and had them do the machining and replacing a couple cylinders and all the rest that was necessary, I got them to dip tank the block 3 times to try and get the rust out of it. So we agreed that that was good enough, but they never rinsed the block and they never told me they didn't rinse the block. So I just thought, you know, if you dip tank something, you're going to rinse it. And they didn't. So I was getting all sorts of black slime coming out. So I flushed the block 3 times. Seemed to be okay. And now every time I fill it up with antifreeze, I get stuff that looks like this. And on the bottom there'll be a coat of rust down in there. And the last time I flushed it, which was just a few days ago, again I got all sorts of black slime coming out. So I'm not sure what I can do. I'm going to take the block drain plugs out and see what comes out there. So that's the first problem. Second problem is, and this is the way they built it from the factory, I have checked and checked and checked, and every 47 I see that's original has it the same way. This hose, this heater hose, comes from the water pump. So it's a pressure side, and it pumps into this line here, which is the left-hand side of the radiator. The radiator has 2 inputs here. So this sits on the radiator. It holds the thermostat. The thermostat's new. And it's 170 degrees Fahrenheit. The body of the thermostat fits in here. So that's where the hot water comes. And that goes into the radiator here. Then it goes down to the bottom and out the bottom rad hose to the pump. And then the pump pumps it into the right hand side of the block as well as over to the left hand side of the block through this hose. This is the output, and again I've checked and checked and that's what they all have. I'm going to check this fitting that's down here again because I think it might be a little restrictive, might be a little too thick, although that's the one that came with the block. And then it has a crossover pipe here which is 1/2 inch. And this is 1/2 inch stainless. I might just change that for copper because it's just a little bit bigger on the inside dimension. And then that goes to the top of the heater box, which is here. And then the output here goes to the lower portion. It's not very good, sorry, but this line here that goes into the water pump. Right there. So that's what we have at this point. Everything seems to be correct. looking at the radiator, you can see in there the tubes look quite good, and when I look down through this side with a camera, like borescope, they look good. As far over this side as I can go, they look good. I've shoved the wire through, thin wire through a few of them, and it goes through. One thing I did find is this was jammed in the bottom. What the heck could that be? Thought it was some kind of rubber ball, but my wife said that's an acorn. So there it is, a rotten acorn sitting in the radiator. Squirrels. So clean up the fins again, paint it again just for a laugh, make sure it's clear. What I'm going to do this time is, I have done before from the top, is put in a hose, and I can't fill it up. It runs out as fast as I can pour it in. But I'll do it the other way around. The reason I'll do it the other way around is because the block is still putting out stuff like this. And I found a couple of rust pieces. You can see one there. Change the light. There's one there, sitting on top of the one of the core tubes. So those would block things too. So I will do that, and I'll continue to see what I can find. So upon further checking, trying to shove a wire down some of the tubes, and I am limited quite a bit to the number I can get to, which is basically that about 10 right in the, that you can see there, because there's a shield here that blocks access, and there's another support bar there that blocks me getting into the other side with any kind of force to go down into the tubes. So what I found is a couple of them are blocked down near the bottom. So I'm going to fill it with vinegar, let it sit for a bit. Some of the tubes, I'll try and get a wire down some of them, and if I find ones that are blocked, I'm going to try and apply some heat and try and break up the mineral and get the vinegar to absorb into it, and that will flush it out. Vinegar will dissolve normal mineral that is found in water, lime and so on. So I will see what happens there. The other option is to plug it, apply a few pounds of pressure, let it sit, and hopefully squeeze the vinegar into where the mineral is stuck. So I'm doing this because I cannot find a shop anywhere that will take this radiator to either recore or dip tank it. The only ones I can find are truck and farm implement radiator shops, and they want they'll do it, but they want me to wait a couple months probably, so that's going to be a last option. I'll try this first and see how clear I get it. The water does flow through it pretty well, so I'm really just kind of grasping at straws to return it to full functionality. Time for another treatment. Look what came out of it. I'm shocked. I've done this before and I didn't get that much out. So more stuff washing out of the block, I would assume. Good grief. So filter this, put it back in, let it soak, try it again. It's like panning for gold, except it's iron ore. That's from this rinse. Another one to follow, obviously. I don't know if there's any hope for this process. I have flushed the radiator 3 times with water. I put vinegar in it 4 times and let it sit for at least an hour. 1 time overnight. Still getting this stuff out. So one last shot. I know I keep saying that. So I've plugged this up. I'm going to put a few pounds of pressure on it with vinegar. Cleaning vinegar, 10%. And then see what happens. So this is 1.5 inch pipe adapter, ABS. Then I just used some galvanized and brass fittings that I had, whatever would work, to put a tire valve on it. And then these are from, I believe that's also ABS. So they're for a 1/2 inch, 3/4 inch, it says, plug. And those just happen to fit into the upper rad hoses. So I've clamped everything up, bolted it. So now take out the cap, put some vinegar in it, slosh it around, and put some pressure on. Now I drained the block by removing the two plugs that were on the bottom end of each side of the block towards the rear, and nothing came out of the left hand side, but the right hand side, the passenger side, is looking quite clean. There's a little bit of rust down the bottom of the antifreeze, if you can see it, but I hate to be negative, but I think that's a bad sign, because it should have been all rusty if it's circulating like it should. I know I've been accused of being negative, but I just have a feeling that that's not a good sign. So let's keep still working on trying to find out why it's got clean antifreeze on one side and rusty, dirty antifreeze on the other side. So I looked down in this port or hole, which I put a second temperature gauge into because I couldn't fix the original one. I haven't given up totally on that yet, but this is a secondary one. And I looked down in there and it looks, I mean, there's a little bit of rust, but not blocked, no big chunks, anything. It looks actually pretty good. The system is supposed to pump out from the front, where the water pump goes. I've also taken the bore scope and looked all in there, and I can't see anything blocking anything. So that then flows through the block, and it's supposed to cross over, after it's cooled this side, cross over to the left-hand side. And it's also got this output from the water pump. So that's a bit perplexing, because even though that appears to be the way it's supposed to be, that's the other side of that line here. That's going in to the fitting that goes to the radiator. So it's the hot water back to the radiator. So it's going to flow both ways, because this one comes from here, from that fitting, and it goes directly to the top of the heater, and the heater feeds back to the bottom end of the water pump. I can't find anything wrong anywhere. I did open these fittings up a bit. They're a bit restrictive, but I'm not going any further than that. That's about 1/2 inch. And there's one on the water pump as well that I've drilled out just to give it a, hopefully a little bit more flow. I can find nothing wrong with the bore scope. That still perplexes me why that's green and the other side was rusty. And draining the radiator and the block, it was rusty. And that's just what was left down in the right hand side, the engine after draining the system. So this water pump, I adjusted this gap before, and it was, I have memory of it being around less than 70 for sure, and it was 75 now. This just presses on. I use the press, put it down a little bit. So now I'm running around 51, the minimum is 50, and I've hammered that with a punch or chisel to try and get it to flare over a bit. I don't really want to weld it on there. So, and it has some play back and forth. Not abnormal, I don't think. It spins nicely. There is some, you can see some bend there in the water pump. But I can't really fix that without replacing the impeller. So I might just leave that. And I'd be surprised if capacity is a problem. So put it back in and see if my rad cleaning job had any potential. There's the drain pan from the clean side. You're draining it through a coffee filter, out of this, that is, not back into it. You can see there's hardly anything. Very little rust. That is confusing. The other side was filthy. I guess I'm going to have to hook up a hose and see if I can force it to flush through on the other side, see how it flows. That's about all I can check. I think there might be hope for this, and I'll show you why. I lift it up and listen. Here it runs now fairly quickly. Just hear one little bubble pop, which indicates to me that there's one tube that's not allowing the fluid to flow through. I'll do it this way. Just a couple little bubbles. Put it on its side. Didn't hear any. The side. I hear two tubes maybe. They're letting bubbles out. Nope, still going. So that's a lot better than it was. So I'll put some more pressure in, let it sit overnight, and then try it again in the morning. Please don't forget to like, share, subscribe, or even notify, or any of the above, or all of the above. Thank you.